She thought her days of purpose ended with her husband's last sermon until a bloodied Apache girl knocked silently on her church door. What followed was a decision that could divide a town or save 2 lives. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The desert wind howled against the small wooden church that stood as the lone sentinel of faith in the Arizona Territory town of Redemption Creek. Sarah Miller swept the dusty floor, her mourning dress now faded to a dull gray after 18 months of wear. The sanctuary was empty save for the memory of her husband, Reverend Thomas Miller, whose absence still haunted every corner of the building he had constructed with his own hands. "Just us again today, Thomas," she whispered to the empty pulpit. At 42, Sarah had settled into her role as the widow who maintained the church despite the dwindling congregation. Most townsfolk had stopped attending after Thomas's death from fever, as if his passing had taken their faith with it. Sheriff Dawson pushed open the heavy wooden door, his boots echoing on the floorboards. "Mrs. Miller, thought I'd find you here." He removed his hat, revealing hair graying at the temples. "Just wanted to warn you about the Apache situation. Army's been pushing them back from their lands again. Could be some displaced folks heading this way." Sarah nodded, her hands gripping the broom handle tighter. "Thank you, Sheriff. Though I doubt any would venture this close to town. Never can be too careful. Tensions are high." He shifted uncomfortably. "The church board's meeting tonight at Whitaker's store. They're discussing, well, the future of this place." Sarah's spine stiffened. "I'm aware, Sheriff. They've made their intentions clear enough. They're just concerned about practicality, Sarah. A church without a preacher for over a year. I understand economics better than most, Sheriff." Her voice remained calm despite the storm brewing inside her. "My husband built this church when Redemption Creek was nothing but tents and hopes. I won't see it turned into a storeroom." After the sheriff departed, Sarah continued her routine, lighting a single lamp as darkness fell. She was arranging the hymn books when she heard it, a soft scratching at the church door. Sarah froze, remembering the sheriff's warning. The scratching came again, more insistent. Heart pounding, she approached the door, lamp in hand, and pulled it open a crack. A small figure huddled on the steps, a girl no more than 12, wrapped in a tattered blanket. Her dark eyes reflected the lamplight, wide with fear. Blood matted her hair on one side, and her feet were bare and blistered. "Child, are you hurt?" Sarah knelt down, but the girl shrank back, trembling. The traditional pattern woven into her blanket told Sarah everything the sheriff had warned about. This was an Apache child, far from her people. "Don't be afraid," Sarah whispered, extending her hand. "I won't harm you." The girl didn't move, watching Sarah with the wariness of a cornered animal. Sarah noticed she clutched something tightly against her chest, a crude wooden cross, similar to those Thomas had once carved to mark the graves of those who couldn't afford proper headstones. "Do you understand me?" Sarah asked but received no response. "Are you hungry?" At this, the girl's gaze flickered with recognition. Sarah mimed eating, and the girl gave an almost imperceptible nod. Looking past the child to the empty street, Sarah knew what bringing an Apache child into her home could mean in a town like Redemption Creek. The memories of her husband's sermons about charity and loving one's neighbor echoed in her mind. "Come inside," she said softly, opening the door wider. "You're safe here." The girl hesitated, then slowly, painfully, rose to her feet. As she stepped into the light, Sarah saw the full extent of her condition, exhausted, injured, and terrified. Whatever had happened to this child, whatever journey had brought her to these church steps, Sarah knew her life was about to change forever. "My name is Sarah," she said, placing a hand on her chest. Then, gesturing to the girl, "What should I call you?" The girl looked at her for a long moment, then placed her small hand against her own chest and whispered a single word, Nisha. It was the first crack in the wall of silence, and as Sarah closed the church door behind them, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 18 months. Purpose. The first light of dawn filtered through the curtains as Sarah dipped a cloth in cool water and gently pressed it against Nisha's forehead. The girl had spent the night in Sarah's small bedroom behind the church, feverish and restless, occasionally murmuring words Sarah couldn't understand. "That's it, child. You're safe now," Sarah whispered, though she knew her words likely meant nothing to the girl. The wound on Nisha's head wasn't as bad as it had first appeared. Scalp injuries always bled profusely, but the fever concerned. A knock at the door startled Sarah. She carefully tucked the blanket around Nisha and went to answer it, smoothing her skirts nervously. Abigail Porter, the doctor's wife, stood on the threshold with a basket of eggs. "Good morning, Sarah. Thought you might like some fresh." Her eyes widened as she peered past Sarah into the room. "Is someone ill? I can fetch Harold if needed." Sarah blocked her view. "Just a traveler who needed shelter for the night." "Nothing serious." Abigail's eyebrows rose. "A traveler? All alone? That's rather unusual." "Thank you for the eggs," Sarah said firmly, taking the basket. "Please give my regards to Dr. Porter." After Abigail left, Sarah leaned against the door, heart racing. Abigail Porter was the town's most notorious gossip. By noon, everyone would know Sarah had taken in a mysterious guest. When she returned to the bedroom, Nisha was sitting up, dark eyes tracking Sarah's every movement. "You're awake," Sarah said with a smile. "Are you hungry?" She mimed eating again, and Nisha nodded. Sarah prepared a simple breakfast of eggs and bread, which the girl devoured as if she hadn't eaten in days. Perhaps she hadn't. As Nisha ate, Sarah noticed a small leather pouch hanging from a cord around her neck. The girl caught her looking and instinctively clutched it. "It's all right," Sarah assured her. "I won't take it." After breakfast, Sarah helped Nisha wash and found her a clean dress that had belonged to the daughter of a church member who had moved away years ago. It was too large, but better than the torn clothes she'd arrived in. "Now," Sarah said, sitting across from the girl, "we need to figure out where you came from and how to get you back to your people." Nisha's face darkened at this, and she vigorously shook her head. "You don't want to go back?" Sarah asked, surprised. Nisha reached for the wooden cross she'd brought with her and held it up, then pointed to herself, then to Sarah, and finally to the church. "You want to stay here? At the church?" Nisha nodded firmly. Sarah frowned. "But your family must be worried about you." At the word family, Nisha's eyes filled with tears. She drew her finger across her throat in a universal gesture that made Sarah's blood run cold. "They single quotes read ... Dad." Sarah whispered. Nisha nodded, a single tear tracking down her cheek. Sarah instinctively reached out, taking the child's hand. "I'm so sorry." They sat in silence for a moment, connected by a thread of shared grief that transcended language and culture. The moment was broken by another knock, this one heavier, more insistent. Sarah rose, anxiety flooding back. Sheriff Dawson stood at the door, hat in hand, expression grim. Behind him stood Jeremiah Whitaker, the wealthy store owner who chaired the church board. "Mrs. Miller," Whitaker said, his voice clipped, "we've received reports that you're harboring an Apache in the church." "Is this true?" Sarah straightened her spine. "I've taken in a child who was injured and alone. She came to the church seeking sanctuary." "Sanctuary?" Whitaker scoffed. "This isn't some Catholic cathedral, Mrs. Miller. This is a Baptist church without a preacher, which you're occupying on our charity." "Mr. Whitaker," Sarah replied evenly, "my husband built this church before you even arrived in Redemption Creek. I hardly think... Is it true?" Sheriff Dawson interrupted. "Is there an Apache child here?" Before Sarah could answer, Nisha appeared in the doorway behind her, chin raised despite her fear. Well, Whitaker said, his lip curling, that answers that question. She's just a child. Sarah protested. She's been injured, her family killed. And how exactly do you know that? Whitaker demanded. Do you speak Apache now? Some things don't need words to be understood, Sarah replied, placing a protective hand on Nisha's shoulder. Sheriff Dawson cleared his throat. Mrs. Miller, I understand your intentions are good, but this town is on edge. The situation with the Apache is complicated. There's nothing complicated about showing Christian charity to a child in need, Sarah said firmly. Sarah, Whitaker said, his voice dangerously soft, the church board meeting tonight will now include a discussion about your continued residence here. I suggest you consider your position carefully. After they left, Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, trembling slightly. Nisha looked up at her questioningly. It's all right, Sarah assured her, though she wasn't certain of that at all. We'll figure this out together. As she spoke the words, Sarah realized she meant them. Whatever came next, she wouldn't abandon this child. Thomas would have taken her in without hesitation, and for the first time since his death, Sarah felt certain about what he would want her to do. That night, as Nisha slept, Sarah opened her Bible to Matthew 25-35. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. The words, so familiar, now held new meaning. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but tonight, Sarah knew she had done what was right. 3 days passed, each one bringing new challenges and small victories. Nisha's fever broke, and the wound on her head began to heal. Sarah had kept her inside, away from the curious and often hostile eyes of the townspeople, but she knew they couldn't remain hidden forever. On the 4th morning, Sarah was teaching Nisha simple English words when a shadow darkened the doorway. She looked up to find Robert Hayes, the town's schoolteacher, watching them with unconcealed interest. Good morning, Mrs. Miller, he said, removing his hat. I hope I'm not interrupting. Mr. Hayes, Sarah acknowledged, rising from her chair. This is unexpected. Hayes was new to Redemption Creek, having arrived only a month before Thomas fell ill. In his mid-30s, he'd brought progressive ideas about education that had raised eyebrows among the more conservative townsfolk. I heard about your guest, he said, nodding toward Nisha, who watched him warily. Word travels fast in small towns. Indeed it does, Sarah replied cautiously. What can I do for you? Hayes stepped inside, his eyes kind as he regarded Nisha. Actually, I thought I might be able to help you. Before coming here, I spent 2 years teaching at a mission school near Apache territory. I picked up a bit of their language. Sarah's eyes widened. You can speak with her? A little, Has confirmed. He turned to Nisha and spoke several words in a language Sarah didn't understand. The girl's face transformed with surprise, then cautious hope. For several minutes, Hayes and Nisha exchanged words with many gestures and repetitions. Sarah watched, transfixed, as the barrier that had stood between her and the child began to crumble. Finally, Hayes turned back to Sarah. Her name is Nisha, as she told you. She's 12 years old and belonged to a small band that lived in the mountains to the north. What happened to her people? Sarah asked quietly. Hayes's expression darkened. Soldiers came. There was a misunderstanding about some missing cattle. Things escalated. He glanced at Nisha, choosing his words carefully. She escaped during the conflict. Her parents and brother did not. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, imagining the horror this child had witnessed. She says she walked for many days, Hayes continued. She was hiding from both soldiers and other Apache bands she didn't know. Then she remembered a kind man with a wooden cross who had once visited her people, bringing medicine during a sickness. He told stories about a place where people would be safe and welcomed. Thomas, Sarah whispered, her heart constricting. My husband visited several Apache settlements 3 years ago, bringing medical supplies during an outbreak of measles. Hayes nodded. She followed the wagon trails, hoping to find this place of safety the man had spoken of. When she saw the cross on your church, she knew she'd found it. Sarah looked at Nisha with new understanding. The wooden cross the girl carried, it must have been a gift from Thomas. "Mr. Hayes, I cannot thank you enough," Sarah said. "But I must ask, why are you helping us? The town seems set against her presence here." Hayes smiled wryly. "Let's just say I don't always agree with the majority opinion in Redemption Creek. Besides, I believe education and understanding are the only real paths to peace." Before Sarah could respond, the door burst open. Sheriff Dawson stood there, flanked by Whitaker and two other men from the church board. "Mrs. Miller," Whitaker said coldly, "the board has reached a decision. You have until tomorrow to vacate the church property." "On what grounds?" Sarah demanded, though she knew the answer. "Improper use of church facilities, harboring potentially dangerous individuals, and defying the express wishes of the board," Whitaker listed off. "Need I continue?" "This is outrageous," Haas interjected. "She's offering Christian charity to an orphan child." "This isn't your concern, schoolteacher," one of the board members snapped. Sheriff Dawson looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Miller, I'm sorry, but they do have the legal right to make this decision." "And the girl?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with anger. "What do you propose happens to her?" "The Army has a detachment passing through tomorrow," Whitaker said. "They'll take her to the reservation where she belongs." "No." Sarah moved to stand in front of Nisha. "Those soldiers may be the very ones who killed her family." Hayes quickly translated for Nisha, whose face drained of color. She began speaking rapidly, clutching at Hayes' arm. "What is she saying?" Sarah asked urgently. Hayes looked grim. "She says the soldiers wore blue coats with yellow trim. That's the uniform of the detachment stationed at Fort Benson, the same ones coming through town tomorrow. You see?" Sarah pleaded with the sheriff. "You can't hand her over to them." Dawson shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Miller, I don't have any authority to." "I think we're done here," Whitaker interrupted. "Sheriff, ensure Mrs. Miller and the Apache are gone by noon tomorrow. The church board will be taking possession of the property." After they left, Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Hayes knelt beside her. "Mrs. Miller, Sarah, I may have a solution," he said quietly. "My sister runs a boarding school in Colorado. It's progressive, accepts children of all backgrounds. Nisha would be safe there, could get an education." "Colorado?" Sarah repeated. "That's so far." Hayes nodded sympathetically. "It is, but what future does she have here?" Sarah looked at Nika, who was watching them with fearful eyes. What future indeed? And what future did Sarah herself have now, with no home, no church, no purpose? An idea began to form in her mind, radical, frightening, but somehow right. "Mr. Hayes," she said slowly, "how difficult would it be for two people to reach this school in Colorado?" Hayes' eyebrows rose. "You mean ... "I have nothing left for me here," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "Perhaps it's time I found a new purpose." As the reality of her decision settled over her, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace. Thomas had always taught that God worked in mysterious ways. Perhaps bringing Nisha to her door wasn't just about saving the child. Perhaps it was also about saving Sarah from the empty half-life she'd been living since losing her husband. That night, as she packed their meager belongings, Sarah found Thomas's Bible. Inside the cover, he had written his favorite passage. Pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress. Sarah smiled through her tears. Even now, Thomas was guiding her path forward. Dawn broke over Redemption Creek in a blaze of orange and crimson. Sarah had been awake for hours, finalizing their preparations. Hayes would arrive soon with a wagon to take them to the stagecoach station in the next town. bypassing the army detachment that would arrive by midday. Are you ready? Sarah asked Nisha, who stood clutching the small bundle containing her few possessions. Thanks to Hayes' translations over the past day, communication had improved between them. Nisha nodded, her dark eyes solemn but no longer filled with the raw fear Sarah had first seen in them. Good, Sarah said, adjusting the girl's shawl. Mr. Hayes will be here soon. A sharp knock startled them both. It was too early for Hayes. Sarah motioned for Nisha to stay back as she approached the door. Sheriff Dawson stood there, his expression grave. Mrs. Miller, we need to talk. Sarah's heart sank. Sheriff, if you've come to enforce the board's decision, I know what you're planning, he interrupted quietly. Hayes isn't exactly subtle. The army arrived early, Mrs. Miller. They're at Whitaker's store now, and he's told them about the girl. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. They're coming here? Soon, Dawson confirmed. I came to warn you. Sarah studied his face. Why? You've made your position clear enough. Dawson removed his hat, turning it in his hands. Your husband was a good man, Sarah. He helped my Mary when she was sick, sat with her until the end. Never asked for payment, just did what was right. He looked up, meeting her eyes. I owe him that much at least. Behind her, Nisha made a small, frightened sound. Sarah turned to see the girl pointing out the window. A group of men in uniform was visible at the end of the street, heading their way. It's too late, Sarah whispered. No, Dawson said firmly. There's another way. Come with me now. Sarah hesitated only a moment before grabbing their bags. Nisha, come quickly. They followed Dawson out the back door of the church and through the small cemetery where Thomas was buried. Sarah paused briefly at his grave, whispering a silent goodbye. Dawson led them to a stable behind his office. Inside, 2 horses were saddled and ready. The boundary to the next county is 5 miles east, he explained, helping Nisha onto one of the horses. Hayes will meet you at Miller's Creek. From there, you can reach the stagecoach station without crossing back into town. Why are you doing this? Sarah asked, still stunned by his change of heart. Dawson's weathered face softened. Maybe I'm tired of watching good people suffer for doing the right thing. Or maybe your husband's sermons about courage and compassion finally sank in. He handed her the reins. Either way, you'd best hurry. Sarah mounted the second horse, adjusting her skirts. It had been years since she'd ridden, but some skills never truly fade. Thank you, she said simply. Dawson nodded, then slapped the horse's flanks. Go! They rode east, the rising sun at their backs casting long shadows before them. Sarah's heart pounded with fear and exhilaration. Behind them, she could hear shouts. The soldiers had discovered their absence. Nisha rode surprisingly well, her small form balanced perfectly on the horse. The girl who had arrived on her doorstep half dead was now leading the way, her face set with determination. They reached Miller's Creek by mid-morning. Hayes was waiting with a wagon as promised, his face breaking into a relieved smile when he saw them. You made it, he called. I was beginning to worry. Sheriff Dawson helped us, Sarah explained as they dismounted. The army arrived early. Hayes nodded grimly. I heard. The stagecoach leaves in an hour. We should hurry. As they loaded their belongings into the wagon, Sarah noticed Nisha standing by the creek, looking back in the direction of Redemption Creek. She approached the girl gently. Are you all right? Nisha turned to her with tears in her eyes. In halting English, she spoke the few words Hayes had taught her. Thank you for saving me. Sarah knelt beside her, taking the girl's small hands in her own. No, Nisha, you saved me, and it was true. For 18 months, Sarah had been merely existing, a ghost haunting the church her husband had built. Now, for the first time since Thomas's death, she felt truly alive, filled with purpose and hope for the future. As they climbed into Hayes' wagon, Sarah caught a glimpse of riders on the horizon, the soldiers still searching. But they were too late. By nightfall, she and Nisha would be on a stagecoach heading north, towards a new beginning. "Mrs. Miller," Hayes said as he urged the horses forward, "my sister's school is always looking for teachers. With your experience leading Sunday school." Sarah smiled, watching as Redemption Creek disappeared behind them. "Perhaps, but first, I need to ensure Nisha is settled." She glanced at the girl beside her, who was watching the passing landscape with wide, curious eyes. "We have a long journey ahead of us." "Yes," Hayes agreed, "but sometimes the longest journeys lead to the best destinations." The wagon crested a hill, revealing the vast expanse of territory stretching before them, untamed. Challenging, but full of possibility. Like the land itself, their future was uncertain, but rich with promise. As they descended toward the stagecoach station, Sarah noticed Nisha clutching the wooden cross Thomas had given her, her fingers tracing its simple lines. The girl caught her watching and smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. In that moment, Sarah understood what Thomas had always tried to teach her, that faith wasn't just about church buildings or Sunday sermons, but about living with courage and compassion. It was about recognizing the divine in unexpected places, even in a frightened Apache girl who appeared on church steps in the dead of night. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be hardships, prejudices to overcome, a new life to build. But for the first time in a long while, Sarah Miller looked to the future not with dread, but with hope. And that, she knew, was the greatest gift Nisha had given her.